Okay, and welcome back, students who are taking financial accounting. We're working through the theory videos for Chapter 2, Analyzing and Recording Business Transactions, and this is the 9th video in this series of videos. And in the last video, we left off creating the income statement. Okay, now I'm not going to go back over, as a summary what we created before. Watch the previous video, right? But we're going to take this here, net income, and we're going to now talk about creating our statement of retained earnings. Right? Remember, let me back up here. We're getting this information off of our trial balance. Right? So in the previous video, we created the income statement using our revenue and expense accounts. Okay? But notice that at the only account, and you'll see the only account that we're going to use from our trial balance here is this dividend account, right? Why? Because we had a profit or loss from the income statement, and notice that we don't have a retained earnings account on this trial balance just yet. Okay. Normally, after common stock, let me back up here. If you As you've been watching these videos, we have assets, liabilities, and equity. And you know that in the equity section for a stockholder, for an incorporated corporation, generally we have common stock, and we also have a retained earnings account, and the dividends are being shown underneath the equity also. But notice here on the trial balance, I don't have a retained earnings account. Okay. Well, if I don't have a retained earnings account, that means that balance when it first got started was zero. When you create a trial balance, my suggestion is that you list all of the accounts and the balances in those accounts, even if the account amount is zero. Okay. The reason why is because you could be looking at this trial balance and saying there is no retained earnings. All right. There may be no retained earnings account, and you wouldn't be sure of that. All right. So I disagree with the authors in this respect, in that I would list the retained earnings account right here, and I would show it as a zero balance in my credit column, right? Because why? The trial balance is nothing more than a listing of the ledger accounts and the balances in those accounts. Some computer programs will run and not include zero balances. Some people, when they're handwriting it, they don't want to write all of that out. And if it stays inside the business and you're the only one using it, go ahead and skip it. But like I had said, if this information is being given to somebody else, you want to make it as easy for them as possible, and therefore list the balances in those accounts, okay, even if they are zero, all right, so they can see that, oh, retained earnings had a zero balance, right? So we're going to take that information from the trial balance, along with a profit or loss from the income statement. We're going to create the statement of retained earnings, and like I said, follow the process, okay? For the statement of retained earnings, we create the heading, the name, and we list the name of the financial statement. And we have a heading date. Well, the heading date is the same date that we use for our income statement, because both are created for a period of time. So if you're not sure about the date, go back and watch the introductory videos. Some of the other theory videos, or watch the previous video, which was on creating the income statement. I explained what I do for the heading date. Okay, so I'm not going to repeat myself for that. All right. Now, once I've created the heading, all right, and again, that's all center aligned, the next thing I want to put in is my retained earnings beginning date and retained earnings ending date. I write out the words retained earnings, and I put the date for the beginning of the accounting period. And in this case here, the author did this correctly. In some of the exercises in the previous chapter, he was using the ending date of the previous accounting period as the beginning date of the current accounting period. And that, I feel, is wrong. But I think in this case here, since this business apparently was started on January 1st. That's why it has a zero balance for a beginning date. He used the date January 1st, 2014. Right? Notice that this is for the month ended January 31st. Okay, and that's why I'm stressing, if this was, let's say, for the month ended February, okay, well, if it was for the accounting period February, my retained earnings balance would be $900. So my beginning balance, I'm sorry, my retained earnings, and I would make the date February 1st, 2014, and I'd show the beginning balance is $900. The author in the previous exercises would not use February 1st as the date. He would actually use the date January 31st, 2014 as the beginning date. Okay, and again, technically it's not wrong because your ending balances become your beginning balances, but for clarity purposes, you're talking about this accounting period. So the beginning date of this accounting period is the very first day of that accounting period. So that's what you write on your first line. On your last line, you're going to write in retained earnings, and you use the last date of the accounting period. Now, at this point in time, you're not going to have an amount. You're going to figure that amount out. So you're not able to write those figures in. But what we're doing here is we're going to, after we've written our heading, I write retained earnings, the very first date of the accounting period, and I write in whatever the balance was, from the previous accounting period. Okay, and make sure you use the dollar sign because it's the first number in that column. All right, the first dollar amount in that column. In this case here, the amount is 0. Okay. Then I write the word add and colon. Notice that there's a colon there. And I write the word less and notice the colon. Okay. To calculate our retained earnings, we start out with the beginning retained earnings, and then we add in the net income for the month. Or I could have just written net income. Okay, I don't have to write for the month, right? I write in the column the $1,400. Okay, so this is like number 3 here. I'm going to write add, right? And then the word less. And then I'm going to write in for the net income, and I'm going to fill in the amount in the column. And then number 5, notice that this is indented. Okay, number 5, I write the word subtotal. I draw an underline because there's a mathematical calculation there. And I put in the total. So 0 plus 1,400 gives me 1,400. Right? Then the next thing I do is I write the word dividends. So that's like number 6 in the process. And I write in whatever the amount of the dividends are. Now notice that I'm using the word less here, okay? But I'm using a positive number over here. Even though I'm going to take the $1,400 and I'm going to subtract out the 500, okay? I don't write minus 500, or I don't put it in brackets. And the reason why is because I wrote the word less over here, okay, as part of the description. And writing the word less, that tells me that I'm going to end up subtracting the 500. If I actually made this a negative 500 and I have the word less here, well, that tells me that I'm going to add the 500 to it, to the 1,400, and that's not right. Okay, so you write in the word less, and remember, for financial statements, we're trying to use positive numbers almost all of the time. There's going to be occasions where you have to use a negative number, but for the vast majority of the time, you're going to use a positive number. Okay. So by writing the word less, that allows us to write a positive $500. But we know that it's a subtotal less the dividend, so it's 1,400 less the 500, which gives us the amount of $900, which is our ending retained earnings, right? So I have an underlined for that calculation to give me the 900, and then I write my double underline because that's the end of the calculation, and I write in the dollar sign, right? So that's kind of like the process I go through, right, in creating the statement of retained earnings. I write in the heading, I write the beginning date, I write in the ending date, I write in the add and the less, then I write in the net income and the subtotal and do the math, right? Get the math here. And then I write the dividends, okay? Write that in and do the math to get my final amount, my ending retained earnings, right? You do that process again and again and again, okay? And you just follow, notice that I'm only using one column here. Can I use more than one column? Yes. But for right now, just follow what's in the book and use the one column, okay? Notice that these, I could have used more than one column because these are, a mathematical calculation of two numbers, okay? I could have made that one column to the right and put my subtotal in the left-hand column. And then I could have subtracted these two out and had my balance. So, if I wanted to use multiple columns, and remember, multiple columns are called a multi-step statement. One column is called a single step, okay? When it comes to retained earnings, because and unless you're into the big corporations, and you'll learn about this when you're in intermediate accounting if you have it. For everybody else, doing a single step for the statement of retained earnings is the way to go. There's no need to use multi-step, and that's why it's being presented in financial accounting, because financial accounting is a 40,000 foot view. Once you get into intermediate accounting, you're going to get into a lot more complication, and you're going to end up using multi-step for the statement of retained earnings. But for right now, just use the one column, okay, and figure out what your balance is of $900, okay, and then we're going to use that $900 on our statement of retained earnings here, and that's going to end up on our balance sheet. So having that bit of information now allows us to be able to create our balance sheet, which is the subject for the next video. Okay. So with that said, pause and rewind the video if you didn't understand something, and feel free to contact an instructor either by email, by clicking on contact us, or by telephone. All right. See you in the next video.